But I read out of my German hymn book that my grandma gave me. I read out of that every morning. It helps me to keep associated with the language, the words and everything. It's just special to me.
I lived on a farm. We didn't have electricity. And when I started school, I had 4 miles to walk one way. And my mother thought I was too young, so I didn't start first grade till I was 7. And I didn't understand or could speak any English because my parents always talked German at home. We also had German in school. Our catechism was German on one side and English on the other. It was Swan's little red catechism. And I guess I had German till about 3rd grade. Electricity was a big thing when that came about, because before that you had to heat up that wood stove in the kitchen and to heat those irons. So the iron, in fact, she bought it before we even got the electricity.
Indoor or outdoor toilet?
Oh, definitely outdoor.
And I'm afraid to ask, Sears and Roebuck catalog or corn cobs?
I remember the Sears Roebuck catalog, but I heard about the corn cobs.
Edgar Eugene Dreyer. They call it Edgar Eugen Dreyer. That's German. I have an older brother. We still speak German. That's all we talk. He's 86. And when we're by ourselves, we just talk German. And my mom and dad, we talk. That's all we ever talk. I didn't know any English when I started school in 1941.
And how old are you?
78. I have 2 sisters and 1 brother. I had an older sister. She died when she was 13 years old on my 4th birthday. April 29, 1939, she died. And the one thing I do remember about her was the coffin. In those days, they brought the coffin into the house, in the gute Stube, the living room. You know, that's the room that was closed off all the time. And I do remember that. So she did not get to be confirmed, because she was sick, I guess, from December on until she died in April, you know. Winter fever, they called it those days. It's pneumonia nowadays, so just couldn't get over it. My mom said it was the hardest thing she ever went through. I think it made a little problem with, man and wife too, because they say, well, you could have done something different, or.
Now you walked 4 miles to school every day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody said uphill both ways.
In the snow.
In the snow. And we walked the snow. Now, our parents did not take us. It had to be bad weather. In the wintertime, from back there, we started with a coal oil lantern walking. And walked about halfway and left it either along the road somewhere or else where Brent Ross lives now. And then, by the time we got there, it was light enough to see. And then walking home, you didn't need it. You'd get home in time for dark. But well, we even as kids, when we were walking to school, we always talked German. Now, we did argue over tractors. I know that's not German cultures, but we had international tractors. The neighbor had Allis-John, the other one had John Deere, and mine was always better than yours, or yours was better than mine. I know one night going home down our farm lane, we were really arguing bad about tractors, and I was the only one for international. And here they got mad at me. They pushed me down in a gully. There was one gully next to this road, and there was one tin can. It cut me here in the back. So we got me home, and they took me into Doc Fisher, and he put hog rings.
Oh.
That's how I clamped little tiny little hog rings, clamped it together. Then he wrapped my whole face, my mouth, my nose, my ears, and eyes were looking out. That's the way I went to school next day. I went to the 8th grade here. Then I went to Altenburg, had public school to the 10th grade. Then my dad said, "Junge, jetzt musst du arbeiten." Son, now you have to go to work. So I went to work. I never went any further, and I really don't regret not having more education, because good Lord blessed me with what I did.
Myrtle Keenard, Myrtle Schilling Keenard. Dad never went to public school. they learned it as they were living among the people that spoke English. As we then, in school, we had the German, the Aufgabebuch, German grammar, and English. So we had 2 days a week, we had German and English, because we had an English book and a German book. And I helped in the kitchen. Lillian did the same thing. In fact, she and I were not, we only were allowed to go as far as 9th grade. And then when I was married, and I always wanted to go to school. I wanted to be a stenographer. And my husband said one time, he said, if you would have been a stenographer, you would have never looked at me, because he was interested in farming. So anyhow, well, didn't get, so I cried for a couple of weeks. I wanted to go to school. I was baptized here in front of this altar and confirmed here and married here. He was 3 years older than me. Oh yeah, I remember him going to school, and I was in 4th grade and he was in 7th. I know he said he sat up here. The young boys always would sit up here. And he said, and the younger girls were always supposed to walk in here and sit up front here with their grandparents or some family member. And he told me once that he said to one of those boys as I walked in, he said, I'm going to ask her out one day. He asked me once after a church service in the evening whether I would go out with him. See, I was a little nervous, and he was whether I would go. I said to him, well, we're going to have to talk to my dad. He said, well, I'll go with you. So he was talking over here with some of his neighbors, and I approached him from the back side. I said, Dad, Ernie had asked me whether I would go with him. And he said to him, you have her home, though, by 12 o'clock. I call her at 4:30 to help me milk. I always had to help Dad milk.
Now, how old were you when you got asked out that time?
13.
13.
He was my first date, yeah.
Oh, man.
And we just went up to town, and at Johnny's Fable's place, he had a little tavern, and we played the jukebox, and we each drank a beer, and then we went.
At 13?
Well, there was no restrictions at that time. We dated when I was 14 and 15 years old, and he was called into the service in 1940 when the Second World War started, and he went to Great Lakes to get his training. 8 weeks he was there. We promised each other that if he would come back, we would get married. So I was promised to him. But he said, I don't want to get married because he said, if I won't come back, then I don't want you to be a young widow. We wrote each other all the time, no matter where he was. Sometimes I had to wait 3 weeks, sometimes a month before, it depended on where he was. He was aboard ship most of the time. We always kept count. Every time I wrote him a letter, I put a number on it. And he said, well, that was number 500 and something. I guess I wrote him close to 1,000 letters. And he wrote me about 700 because he didn't always have a chance. Yeah, I wrote to him every day. I saved all the ones that he sent me, but he said, I'm sorry, I could not save the ones from you, because he said we were out at sea and it was so rough, and they said, get rid of everything that is not that important. He said, I hated to do that, but he said, I had them saved. And then one guy came around and he said, what's that? He said, those are my letters. Oh, he said, you don't have to have them. So he said it was with a heavy heart that he put them overboard. They were fighting the Japanese, and he was a turret gunner aboard his ship. They were in a convoy, and he said the Japanese pilots, their mission was to commit hara-kiri and put that plane down the smokestack of one of those carriers. And so he said, then one guy always said, Kraut, get him or I'm going to leave. He said, where in the heck are you going to go? He said, you have to go in the drink. Anyhow, so he said, and when he was home, then he sometimes sat there and contemplated. He said, yeah, I shot husbands, brothers, and sons, and that bothered him. I said, honey, it was war. You were committed. You had said that you would defend our country, and they were threatening us, so. Uncle Audie's wife, she said once at the dining room table, she said that only German-speaking people would get to heaven. And my husband had an answer for her. He said, well, he said, the Lord Jesus didn't speak German,